I've got 6.
I do too. I was letting Joe get seated. All right. Yeah, we heard. I'd like to call the Dover Select Board meeting, the pre-town meeting to order at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, March 1st. So Rich, our moderator, is here, and so I'd like to turn the meeting over to Rich to moderate.
Thank you, everybody. Big crowd tonight. We really appreciate everybody coming out in this huge snowstorm. We hope you can make it. Travis is here to guide you home in case you can't get there. He's gonna make sure we all get there. Everybody got their town report. I just wanted to say, I guess Lynn Holland gave us a bunch of the old Holland family pictures. Not Holland, the Mundell, and some from Eastover and some from Westover. So just make sure you pay attention to those because you may get a bottle of pickles if you recognize something in there. We also, I had a little hiccup with Andy, but I had gone through and made like 3 pages of trivia questions. I was going to try to sneak them in the town report like Mary Lou used to have, like little, 25 years ago, we voted to spend $300 to buy a new plow truck. And, and when you look at what the plow trucks go for today, you kind of a little shocked. I think Bobby's first plow truck he bought was $300. But if you also go into your book, we've been putting this in for a few years. On page 6 and 7 is how town meeting works, the guide sheet, how you make a motion, that you have to be recognized. In the old days, somebody would want to limit discussion and yell out point of order. That was buzzy. And then they would say, call the question, call the question. So there's a little direction there. You can't just yell out, call the question. You have to be recognized. So if you have any questions on that, you can ask after the meeting or you can ask during the meeting. But the reason we're all here today starts on page 8. The reason we're going to review this to be really ready for next week. So around 10 o'clock in the morning, Andy will call the polls open and let you go vote. And we got a sample ballot here. And the first thing we're going to do is you vote, but you don't vote live, you vote in the voting booths. So we're going to vote for an auditor. There's no contested race, right, Andy? So Tamara Allen is asking for your support to be the auditor. First constable, Andy's asking for your support to be first constable. Edward Brookman is asking for your support for library trustee. I'm asking for your support for town moderator, please. It's the best job I got. Select board members, Scott will be here shortly. And Vicky, we got 2 this year. Vicky's running for a 2-year term and Scott for a 3-year term. And Marcos is asking for your support as trustee of public funds. That's how he goes to Bermuda every winter, right? The tropical islands. So the first article, and again, I think what I'm going to discuss with the voters, and we'll see what you all think of it, is what we usually do is we usually say the person, or the rules are, the person that makes the motion gets to speak first on the article, and the person who seconds it, we give them the second shot at it. Technically, the book says you're supposed to have a pro and a con. So you have somebody speak for the article and somebody against it, but that's kind of hard to do because I don't know how people are going to speak. And sometimes there are going to be people supporting it or people that are upset with it. What we have found sometimes, and what we used to do before we did this, is we would have somebody speak to the article. So if there was an article to anoint Travis, supreme dictator of all highway departments in southern Vermont, and Mark made that motion, Mark would get to speak to it first, but sometimes it would be good for Travis or the select board to explain why that article's there. So it's going to be up to the option of the person making the motion. They can defer, sort of like in football when you win the coin toss, you defer to receive until the second half. You can defer to the person that brought the article forward, and then you'll get the first question after they've explained it. So it may give you a question. There may be people want to make a motion, and sometimes I'm like pointing at people to make motions, because the other thing to remember is the only way to get your name in the book, and in 30 years when we haven't, we're giving out pickles again, and say that who made the motion to approve the budget or make Travis benevolent dictator of all highways, That could be a question. So you only get your name in the book if you make a motion or second it. So I try to go around so we can record some of the people that are here. So the first article is a really easy one and it's good practice one. It's shall the voters accept the annual report of the auditors and other town officers, which is usually your book. Any questions on that or any comments or? No, good. No arguments on the first one. Second one, which is Article 3. So the voters compensate town officers as follows: select board chairman, $3,000 annual stipend, select board members, $2,500 annual stipend, town treasurer, $5,000 stipend, town clerk, $72,841.19. Town auditors at $20.38. All others, the chairman is the Vermont minimum wage plus $1.50, members Vermont minimum wage, and mileage based on the federal reimbursement rate for the month in which mileage occurred. So if this was the actual meeting, somebody move it, second it, you do have to stand up and read the article, second it. And then I would say, if you folks approve it, that would you like, Mark, you made that motion, would you like to defer and hear an explanation before you ask your question? And then you can say yes or no. We're going to pretend you said yes. So we're going to defer.
Everything is the same as in previous years. However, we are proposing all administrative personnel a 4% raise. So in this particular article, the town clerks, that rate is 4% above last year.
So are there any questions? Is that a good explanation? Everybody okay with it? Cool. Remember, we got to also go from 10 to at least noon time so that we can get fed. And we don't want to break too early and have people leave and not eat. Article 4 is voters authorize general fund expenditures for operational expenses in the amount of $2,520,452.51. So Bobby Holland made that motion, but he wanted to defer. So we're gonna.
The general fund starts on page 26 and goes to page 33. If you go to page 33, just as the heads up, as with most years, we have particular requests for funding broken out as individual articles. So it looks like the budget is down 2%. It is not if we vote in all these articles. It is actually going to be up. So that's just a heads up. So I wanted to give you that information. So as I just spoke, administrative, a 4% raise is in this budget for highway and police, just administrative positions. The rate is between 8 and 10%. We're having a lot of trouble retaining both police officers and highway drivers, operators with CDLs, and it's become a kind of a poaching market going around in the different towns. Luckily, we are now fully staffed, right, Travis? And at the police department as well, correct, Mike? Yeah. So we understand it's a very competitive market right now. And so these are extraordinary raises. We understand that. But we think it's necessary to maintain the great staff we have and to continue to offer the services we have. So that's just an overview of the wages situation. Yes.
Are we taking benefits into consideration, these raises?
Mm-hmm. And we have.
That's pretty good starting pay, don't you think?
I absolutely agree. But if you look at other towns that you wouldn't think, and they have very similar packages. And right now, as we've been told by particularly Travis, it doesn't matter. The wage is what matters, and that they'll turn it down because they can make $2 an hour somewhere else.
So why we're gonna take a look at the benefit package if it don't matter? Yeah,
I know. I know. Well, it is extraordinary. I know, but we are actually on the lower side of some of the town highway pay, and also in the police department.
Well, and the other thing I'd like to point out is because we adjusted the highway overtime, down, if you aggregate,
I know that.
right? We're really only looking at about 1%, an actual 1%.
Well, I'm not
increase.
complaining about the big
Right.
money, but,
Yeah.
it just seems like we're not taking the benefits into consideration.
We are, and because the problem is when someone's hired, sometimes the money is more important and
Oh, I
sometimes the
understand
benefits are more important and you can't
I'm
really
not
say,
complaining.
I'll give you $5 an hour more, but I'm not
No,
gonna pay your health
it-
insurance.
This has been. When it was proposed by both departments that this type of raise structure be put in place. All of us went, oh my God, a terrible gasp. But then as we struggled to hire operators and highway guys, it was unbelievable.
And good.
And luckily we're going to be fully staffed. We still have some academies situations at the police department. But we've had to change our personnel policy. We're now going to hire younger people. So things are really changing. The pool is small. And if we invest a lot in all of our staff and we want them to stay. So we're feeling that we had an attrition this fall at a terrible time. And it was very, very scary. So we've thought about this long and hard. Last year, the Wilmington Police Department got approximately 10% raise. Highway Department as well. So we didn't do that. Right. But I just talked about, yeah.
Okay.
So, yes, that's fair. You should clarify that.
Yeah, just,
We're on the general fund.
we're on general fund, so it doesn't count highway budgets, so she'll repeat the same thing under highway, just as in.
So we were just talking about the
So
police
really, we
department.
shouldn't, that question would be out of order,
Right.
but if you ask
But
about,
you mentioned the raises and stuff,
Yeah.
so I just.
Yeah.
Right, and highway is their own world, but the police department is in the general
Yeah.
fund, so. Yeah,
it's better than the $4 you started at, Bob, isn't it?
An explanation.
this is extraordinary situation.
But I've been in your shoes before, so I won't complain about it.
So another couple of notes. So if the voters choose to vote in all of the appropriations that are in the budget, which are 5 articles, which total $317,311. The actual general fund would be $2,837,763.51, which is a 10.48 increase over last year.
Okay. Are we to the landfill yet? That's what I'm gonna.
That's under, that'll be under
That's
highway.
under highway, right?
Yeah. No,
That'll be under
No.
highway.
no,
No.
it's under
Solid
general.
waste.
Solid waste operational.
Why isn't Chris getting 8% instead of he's only getting 4%?
That was discussed with the department head and it was felt that that was a fair raise based on the position.
We were treating basically the front line, like the guys who are getting into the vehicles and the police officers who are putting on the bulletproof vests were treated differently than the administrative or support staff in those departments.
Well said,
Good
sir.
questions, Bobby. Good questions.
I'm fine.
Okay. I was gonna say, what was your hourly rate when you started?
Hmm?
What was your hourly rate when you started?
$5.
Yeah, I was
And
gonna
we
say
get
I was
10
around
rate.
5 something.
Mhm.
How much did a car cost?
Yeah,
Plus we paid our insurance.
yeah, like 80%.
Yeah.
Any other questions for anybody, or any comments, any thoughts? And again, since it is not really the town meeting, you don't have to be a voter to speak. Usually at pre-town meeting, we let anybody speak without having to ask them. Yeah, in the back, go ahead.
Right. So when the appropriation, the ones that are warned, that are not figured into the overall until they're budgeted in after, is there a, excuse the term, fudge factor that you've come up with prior to sort of penciling those numbers in?
That's what I just gave you, the number, if they're all approved, the general fund will be up 10.48%.
But so. Okay.
So if one is approved and another one isn't, then that number will change, obviously, but that's the worst case scenario in terms of the number being the highest it could possibly be, is if all 5 of those articles are as they sit on the warning. They may be amended. I mean, 2 years ago, the Deerfield Valley Rescue was amended. So at this point, what is published, that would be the increase.
And those are articles 9 through 13, so we'll get to discuss them in a little bit. So is there any other questions or comments on Article 4? Okay. Hearing none. The other thing to remember at town meeting, if you actually raise your hand and ask a question, we do ask you to identify yourself, just so that Andy can make a record of that. If you were to make a motion or amend something. Article 5, shall the voters authorize highway fund expenditures for operational expenses in the amount of $1,619,759.03. I thought we were always taking pennies out and rounding up.
We've been doing it this way.
Okay. So that is the question. We're gonna pretend that Marco moved it and we're gonna and he chose again to defer.
This is on pages 34 and 35. I think we talked about wages already.
Leave that one up.
Obviously, in all situations, we're expecting higher diesel, gas, oil, all of the fossil fuels, not knowing. So we've incorporated increases.
I have a question on that one.
Okay.
The professional development.
Okay, so we have added a few things. One is CDL training, because we potentially are going to have to hire people that don't have CDLs now. Another is the pavement testing class for 2 employees to test pavement as it goes down to make sure it's up to spec. This was suggested by members of the public who attend our meetings. And we felt that that was an important thing to do. We're putting in a huge investment in, and
Makes sense.
so to have a couple of highway crew able to be there while pavement's going down and testing to make sure the composition is correct. Is that correct for Travis?
I thought somebody was always supposed to be there anyways.
But actually with testing, be able to demand, I don't know that we've tested, did we, Bobby?
Never tested, we just made sure we got the depth. And the pavement was higher.
Mhm.
But no, we never tested.
You all set, Bob?
I'm done.
Go ahead.
Hey, Mr. Reese, I have a question. So what if we invest in these people to get their CDLs and they're like, oh, thanks for my license, and then they take off? Is there any way that we can, are we gonna contract them before we send them to school? What if they fail the driver test? I mean, it's, it's a
Mhm.
commitment.
Mhm. Absolutely, it is.
The same thing with the police department.
Exactly.
We've had
send-
it happen, it's part of doing business, there's nothing we can say, do, or make a contract, and then sign, and give us money back, it's just not something. we can do.
Indentured servants.
In the old days, there used to be contracts,
Yeah.
and they were found to be unconstitutional.
That's why we try to hire seasoned people.
Any other questions on Article 5? Cool, we'll move on to Article 6. Shall the voters raise and appropriate $600,000 for the capital paving fund? And I don't know, Jim would have moved that one because he loves pavement. He deferred again too. Actually, somebody's not gonna defer you guys.
Page 37. So we're looking at the column that says 23-24 for this coming year's paving. It doesn't include any new pavement on non-paved roads. So if it doesn't, we're not extending paving in town in this budget. We're just maintaining the best we can with the resources that we think we need, which is 600,000, which is exactly the same as last year.
Are there any questions for anybody? Go ahead.
Mark Sheldon. So,
Good practice.
thanks, Rich. So I know that in the past, there's been some talk about the value of the paving versus the cost of maintaining the dirt roads. I'm just wondering whether we actually have any numbers on that. You know, over 5 year, 10-year period, what the difference is.
That's a good question. I would defer to our road commissioner to speak to what's involved in maintaining paved versus non-paved roads.
I
I don't expect numbers, but not just.
I don't have any.
Mhm.
I can list off a number of resources that are used on dirt roads versus the blacktop. Like rock, gravel, stone, grading, so grader blades, you know, a grader. You know, I mean, you would need a grader anyway, so I guess you can read that out, but there are numerous things. Sand, so then you, in turn, you have silt and plug culverts, and it just. The list is pretty endless. I mean, it goes on, so. I mean, as far as maintaining, it's just everything.
Well, let me just interrupt for 1 second. The thing about pre-town meeting, one of the reasons this is done is gives a chance for concerns or questions or thoughts to come up that maybe we don't expect an answer, but the question may come up at town meeting, so then you may want to have a better, more thorough or thought out answer. So I want to just remind people that too. Don't, there may be something you ask that there may have to be looked into. There's been times where we've noticed numbers are wrong in the book, so, we've made changes. So, you may not get the answer you want, but you're more than welcome to ask the question again too. Just because you ask it tonight doesn't mean you can't ask it again in a week. So less than a week. So I think, Bobby, and then we'll go back to Sarah.
Gravel roads, you lose about an inch gravel a year. And that's a big one. That's.
Plus you're out constantly cleaning, fixing
Dust.
and mud and fill and.
Remember Handle Road before it was paved by Bears Crossing, and you guys had a grader there like all weekend long. So, Sarah.
So, yeah, I was gonna ask if if you have any sense, or if there's a way to do a kind of quick calculation of the hours invested in a road.
Nice to have like a big graph.
I
And
want
Joe's
you to,
gonna help. you.
Yeah, Joe, draw the graph.
Graph.
but just like,
Can we
you
get a
know what I'm
projector?
saying though? How many hours does it take to maintain a mile of paved road and a mile of dirt road? Approximately.
Ooh, yeah, all kinds.
Yeah, no, it's good.
And that big bridge, Constable.
Mark, let me just see, is there anybody else? Go ahead, Tabby, and then Mark will go for round 2 with you.
My road was recently paved, so we haven't really gone through the winter, spring, summer thaw cycle, so just how will you be able to, or determine how often upkeep is needed on newly paved roads as you start to figure out, are the wet spots the same, what is the buckling and all of that? I'm assuming that is all covered in the $600,000 paving allocation, or is there some room to figure out just how often does this newly paved road need to be maintained, either lightly or heavily maintained?
Yeah.
Okay.
But we have a cabby.
Well, hang on, so. I don't, is there an answer to that question? I think,
I can speak to it. A lot of it depends on usage. You know, that's a giant part of it too, is even if I was to do an analysis. For Mark's question, like, are you gonna pick Dover Hill Road, a mile of that, or are you gonna pick? You know, a mile of
Johnson Hill Road.
Johnson Hill, yeah. Yeah, so like, it varies, and the same goes for Tabby's question, that the usage is huge, and that is. Just a lot of it, you gotta just go with on the fly as far as like, okay. Something's gonna need to be attended to sooner than we had thought on this, because it is, like she said, out of shape, or it's getting used more than it should, or, you know, stuff like that.
thank you.
Well, we have a paving plan in the book, cabby, so as time goes on, we rotate back to all the paved roads, sometimes quicker, sometimes slower, depends. They last longer, we don't have to. That's why we get some new pavement every once in a while, hopefully.
And that's why we are having the highway department, at least 2 employees trained to make sure we're getting the right mix for the for the pavement that's going down. So that we're not getting, because we have in the last few years had some pavement that didn't stand up even for 1 year. And we had to persuade the paving company to come back and fix it. So now we'll know, because we're going to be testing. So we think that that's a great idea that was put forth by the members of the public. And so we are hoping that that will help improve the quality and consistency of the pavement we're getting.
Okay, Mark wanted to ask a second question. Is there anybody else that hasn't got to ask a question yet? Go ahead, Mark.
More of a follow-up slash
Oh,
statement.
I'm sorry.
Part of why I was asking was I'm wondering whether we should be looking further out at our expenses and maybe investing more in paving now would make sense. If there's such a huge discrepancy between what it costs to maintain our dirt roads versus paving some of them, it may make sense to pave more now and save later.
That'd be another.
Get rid of that grader.
That's another graph.
There's
How many paved roads do we have to dirt roads?
That's not that's an accurate assessment, but you also have to take into consideration there are people who live on those roads who become very passionate about keeping their road a dirt road. So we don't get to just do it.
No, I wasn't suggesting you just
Okay.
go and pave all the roads, but there are probably some out there that were either people that live on there would like them paved or don't care one way or another. If we can save some money by doing it down the road, it's just something to consider, not for this year, but in the future.
Okay, some really good discussion there, some good points. Travis has a lot of homework to do. So
Lucky
plan on your
Travis.
roads being paved.
And
in
it's
the
not
next
like
few
it's not
days.
gonna snow every day.
Okay, so thank
Sorry,
you, everybody.
Travis.
Article 7, so the voters raise and appropriate $650,000 for the capital equipment fund, and I guess Tabby maybe moved that one and she deferred again too, so.
Pages 38 and then 39 is the trade-in values. So we have a lot of equipment purchases that we are going to be needing in the next few years. And we realized that the capital equipment fund was not keeping up with those potential needs. We are looking at some fire trucks, which are very expensive. And so we have upped the amount from 500,000 to 650,000 this year that we're requesting.
So any questions on capital vehicles, equipment? Go ahead, Mark,
Do you have
and then I'll get to you.
a replacement schedule for the fire trucks automatically?
Yeah, and we actually have been putting it off because some other departments would need vehicles and I don't always like just saying because it's 20 years old, it's no good, because you know, our rollover Mac is a really good truck, but we're now finding parts are getting a little harder, and that's an 80s truck. And it's also not an easy truck for people on, you know, Travis was, or when they were talking about the highway, you know, getting people who can drive and get their CDLs, and it's getting harder and harder to find people who can drive the truck. I just took somebody out driving the other day and it was pretty bad. What do you mean double clutch? So it was definitely interesting. Bobby would have had fun. All set.
Yes.
Any other questions? I think you had, yes.
Question, as, just like making, just generally, trade-in is, they're gonna give you less of a trade-in than a private sale, so do we make more money selling these vehicles privately or auctioning them off, or is the trade-in the best we're gonna get?
We do either. It really depends. Some go, we just did one, we traded in. Generally, we've started selling things outright. And that's been with bids or by finding other towns that want to purchase them, things like that. So we try to get the best trade in that, whatever we can get for
Whatever's
money
gonna be
back
the
from the
best.
old one. Yeah.
There any other questions or? Cool. Then we're gonna move right on to Article 8. Article 8 is shall the voters raise and appropriate $80,000 for the capital building improvement fund. And Mike Arbogast, he tried to move that one and everybody said, wait a minute, point of order, he's not a member of the town. So Andy moved it and he deferred too. So
Page 40. This is the same amount as we requested last year. We have some ongoing repairs here at the town hall. We are going to install new windows. And we also need to fix some of the brick building. Once we get our well situation figured out with the new well that we've hopefully that can provide a good water source for the building and this building. We want to put a new furnace in and reconfigure the whole maintenance area of the building because it needs it. And some side stairs at the town office. And what else do we have? The town garage, a new roof and storage area.
So are there any questions about capital building improvement fund? Yes, Mark.
I don't know if this is the right place to ask questions, but what is the current status of the PFAS?
As far as I know, the last Jeanette updated me was that they haven't come back to actually, they had to wait for the well to settle out, get the chlorine out of it, and then come back and test it. And it's been kind of snowy since then. So it's been sitting since late fall, awaiting testing. So
We don't really know yet whether.
we don't know. We don't know. And PFAS now the level is so low that the test labs are not even able to read it that low. So there's a lot of technology issues with the testing too.
All right, good stuff.
Mhm.
Any other questions on capital building? Nice guy. Okay, so we got the next 5 articles are articles for to raise and appropriate for other groups. So Article 9, so the voters raise and appropriate $238,939 for the Dover Free Library. And is there any library people here? Let's talk about that? No.
Their budget is on 73.
Okay, so page 73, you can look at the budget. If you have any questions, it would still be good to ask them because we're being recorded.
I
can always field those
and bring them back over there.
So does anybody have any questions about the library place over there? Lots of books, some audio, video. Cool. Next one, shall the voters raise and appropriate 30,000 for Deerfield Valley Rescue Inc.? Because, and usually we have a person here to speak for that. I thought that Bobby said he'd sing at town meeting day, so Bobby Maynard. So hopefully he'll be there, but any questions on that? Cool. Article 11, shall the voters raise and appropriate 25,000 for support and services at home known as SASH? And we usually have a representative from there
Yeah.
at town meeting. Any
Yeah.
questions,
usually-
any thoughts, any?
That is $5,000 more than they
Did last year.
requested last year.
Mhm.
Any questions, comments? Hearing none, and usually these people have reports, there's usually reports in the back of the book,
Stash's reports on page 104.
104. And then, I think we're gonna give a little quick brief update on this one. Article 12, shall the voters raise and appropriate $20,000 for the Dover Historical Society? And I saw a whole bunch of historical stuff at the end of the table.
Dan?
And,
Yes,
oh,
um,
I didn't know if you want to say anything.
nothing happened to me in practice for next week. Essentially, I was hoodwinked into becoming the president of the Historical Society many years ago. Partially because of my skills in digital photography. And here's an example to you of a photograph that was in the archives, which you can hardly see anything of. This is one that I just played with this afternoon. I have a lot more work to do on it. But this is printed on a piece of scrap paper. Similar to that image is this one of Crowdy's Mill and East Dover. So part of our job is to restore your history. And along with that, we also republished Cole's book on the history of Dover. And I actually had 5,000 copies being invested, got permission from the family to do it. So that this way they're available at my store and also at the Historical Society. Obviously, with COVID, the last couple of years, we couldn't have many events. But now we have a series of events we're going to do. We have Mr. Shantz, who did a presentation during the Blueberry Festival in front of my coffee shop. He's going to do a day and night I guess you could say musical repertoire, first for kids and then the evening for adults. That's one of the things we're trying to do. We also want to do a thing where you bring your pictures to the Historical Society. We can see if we can restore them, our history. We also have a lot of construction work that has to be done on an old building. We've been painting it for years. One of the things we did was we replaced all the sashes and windows. We put snow guards on the roof because it was destroying the sill on the bottom of it. And we replaced that with all AZAC to make it so that it doesn't rot anymore. We have more work to do with that. Also for improvements, we're putting, we contracted Swiss Alps and Evans Concrete to put aside the steps on the side of the building. We have a wonderful downstairs that has a carriage from the Civil War, many beautiful artifacts, plus the living history display. And unfortunately, because the stairway is this big, our seniors can't get down the stairway. So we're going to put a set of concrete steps like out here, down there with railings, so that seniors and others can find their way downstairs, because that part of the museum isn't visited that often. We also replaced the furnace in it, partially with a grant of money from the town. We put a Baderas furnace in there. We now use less oil than we did in the past, in like less than half of the amount of oil that we use. So we've been saving money. In a period of 3 years, it paid for itself. That's pretty much the projects, besides the obvious, this is a difficult place to keep a white building white. So we're constantly painting it. The other thing we tried to do is replace all the windows. And we tried to get a hold of Anderson Renewal. We put a proposal to them, but they haven't come back to us. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you, David. Cool. So then our last appropriation is shall the voters under Article 13 raise and appropriate $3,372 for Southeastern Vermont Economic Development Strategy (SEVITS) activities. And they usually have on town meeting, I know they mobilize a whole office and everybody goes to different meetings. So and there is a report in there, and that's so much per person or so much per capita or
Yeah.
something.
And this is not at the new census number. They gave us the old census number, so our number did not go up.
Okay, so
The
nobody
same
tell them
amount.
our census grew, and make sure that, those extra people hide when they come here, so they don't count them.
So-
The report's on page 107.
107. Any-
So I'd like to interject there,
Yeah.
because that's the end of all the money. So if you vote for everything, the extra money for the capital equipment fund, the appropriations, the highway budget, the budget will be up 7.5% over last year. Eric has his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just amazed that that's all it is with the way inflation is. Go ahead, Eric.
We missed the gathering.
It was, the gathering place was that was an era, there's been a revised town meeting. If you're looking at the town report, it is correct. We had a hiccup on that.
So we don't have it.
No, they're in, but.
They're not a separate, they're not a
Right.
standalone.
So
Okay.
the board really talked about who we should warn and who we shouldn't warn. And we kind of came up with some guidelines. We're not going to warn the Eastover Fire Department separately because we feel it's an essential service. But everything else that is either new or is 5 digits or is SEVITS, because we like to hear them come and talk to us every year, is going to be a warned article. So it's not that we're picking on certain people. It's just that 5 digits, $10,000 is a fair amount of money. So that's why these particular ones are warned.
And anybody new, you used to always make.
Always
At least
new.
the first.
Yeah,
one.
first year.
Are there any other questions on Article 13? Okay, now we're gonna get into some Article 14. Shall the voters authorize the select board to apply any surplus from the current fiscal year to reduce taxes in the next fiscal year? And Andy and I were talking the other day, and we were discussing last year's town meeting, and if you remember, that was a big point of discussion, and it was actually a tie vote. And so then we're like, oh, we did change that name. It's like, oh my gosh, did we? And we looked and it was good. So thank you for recognizing the issue that was brought forth. You want to speak to that?
No,
Okay, is there any questions on that? Basically, they take some surplus money and they buy down the tax rate.
that's on every year.
Okay, cool. Article 15. Shall the voters authorize the select board to sell properties which the town has acquired by gift or through tax sales? Any questions? That's just, these are kind of standard ones that are always in there. Tax sales, you've had a few this year, haven't you, Marco, so far? Or one?
Yes.
And then we haven't gotten anything by gift in a long time, have you?
Don't think-
Anybody want to give some land to the town? Just feel free. Shall the voters under Article 16 authorize the select board to set the tax rate sufficient to cover the approved expenses of the town of Dover and the town of Dover highway for taxes due on September 15th and February 15th, 2024, September 15th, 2023, February of 24. Seems so far away. Any questions on that? Pretty standard article. So the voters authorize the select board to borrow money in anticipation of taxes. I can't remember ever borrowing money for taxes. Does anybody? Banks, bond bank.
We have a line of credit with Brattleboro Savings Loan, about 1.8 million. We did that a year or two ago.
Have you used it?
No.
I will say during Irene, it was really interesting because, you know, Bobby was able to just go do stuff and get things fixed and get materials. And I went to a meeting in December over in Newfane, and there was like all the towns are there saying, we're waiting for money. Where's the government's money? We can't do anything till we get money. And we had borrowed money from the reserve funds, and it's worked out really well. And we were pretty much by December back together, weren't we, for the most part? So, I mean, that's really been years and years of planning and good work by previous boards, this board. And, you know, everybody really deserves a pat on the back for that. Everybody's done great. Shall the voters, Article 18. To discuss any items that the voters would like to discuss and to conduct any other business that may legally come before the voters. So if you have something you want to bring up too, and you're not sure, remember, this is not something we can vote. So you can't say, I want to paint all the highway trucks green. I don't like red anymore. And it doesn't matter. It's just, it gives advice or it talks about it for people. It can't be a binding motion. Sometimes the select board may do something one year. They wanted wages printed in the book. And although it was under other business, the select board agreed to do that. Even though it's not required, but a majority of the voters wanted that. So is there any other, I know, yes.
Chairman, it's a comment that there's a lot of talk in the legislature going on right now as far as how towns will move forward with the assessment process. One of the things that I've struggled with over time is we vote on a budget for our town on March 7th, and our grand list doesn't come out until June. So, and other people have talked about that at the state meetings that I go to, and I always felt that our assessment year could continue, and few other people have shared that same thought, and I'm just saying that my opinion and what I would look for would be to do that, so that we're able to vote on a budget that we have the money for, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Well, we vote on a number, and then the grand list reflects what the municipal tax rate is based on the grand list. Of course, the biggest factor is the education tax, which yeah, then, and we don't know until the legislature's done, and then there's a lot of moving targets. So we're basically voting on the money to run the town next year. We're not voting on a tax rate.
No, I know that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, the money to run the town. Just think, sitting in a little better position, maybe we'd have more money to spend. I'm just saying that that's what's happening at the legislature and around the state, the conversations that are going.
Oh, okay.
Okay, is there,
We have two things that we want to bring up.
okay. Is there any comment on Linda's statement? Anything? Okay. Just so you all know too, you can, if there is something you want to see that's not on here, or if there's something you really are very concerned about, like you really want to see the highway trucks be green, you can get a petition, get a bunch of voters to sign on and present it to the select board. And although the select board aren't required to, they would consider a petition by people or bring something up. And usually they start working on the town report and the budgets, sometime in October, November, December. So if there is something you think of over the summer, definitely talk to the select board about it. I think the select board, Vicky said, do you have a couple things you want to talk? And I think.
And one of them's the one that Eric's going to talk about.
Okay, so you want to Eric?
Well, let's do the other one first, and then Eric can do the one that might be more common. So at our last meeting, it was brought forth that there's an opportunity to buy a potential gravel pits site in Jamaica that the town could potentially pay $950,000 plus engineering, plus geology, plus Act 250 permits to purchase. It's about 100 acres in Jamaica. The board, we don't know anything about doing any of those things, buying land out of town, running a gravel pit, going through the Act 250 process on a gravel pit. And it is in Jamaica. It's across from, it's near the Sun Bowl, just past Stratton. So it's not just around the corner. So it could take a lot of time. It would definitely take some upfront money. So we're just kind of gauging opinion on if it's something we should even consider putting our time and effort into. And we would have to employ
Money.
and money into. Gravel is harder and harder to find. The state doesn't like gravel pits. They don't like sand pits. They don't like anything extracted. I think most of ours is coming out of like New Hampshire and the state does.
Northfield, Mass.
Yeah, there's not a lot of interest in the state in opening new gravel pits. So it seems like a lot of money to the board. We thought it was a lot, but we wanted to ask the voters that. Okay.
Yep, we go Tabby and then.
So the primary question would be is if we invested the money in looking at the engineering, would the return from the gravel that we'd be able to take out, whether the town used it or whether the town sold that gravel to
Right.
other towns? I mean.
We don't even know how much
would
gravel is in there. So, I mean,
So-
that's the kind of thing that.
it have to be engineered to find out if it's even worth it?
Oh, yeah.
There's known unknowns and unknown unknowns.
Travis, did you take a look at it to see if it's even worth considering?
I have not looked at it yet.
Oh, okay.
No, I have never set foot
If
in
it
it.
would just stop snowing.
The people who own the property had started the Act 250 permit supposedly and had stopped. There are a couple of wells that have been drilled on the property. Besides that, we don't know anything. Supposedly it's a beautiful property that would be great for development. And so I'm curious why somebody would want to sell it as a gravel pit. But anyway, there's a lot of, it would be an expensive endeavor just to make sure that we did our due diligence.
Putney Dummerston did it too. Go ahead, sir.
It could be a long time before you got a 250 permit from the state. On top of legal fees, never mind the engineering and all the other stuff. Is it worth the investment to get something 10 years down the road? It's a lot of money.
That's why we're asking, because this was kind of came out of the blue at us.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I've seen that, it's 2 lots of land
Mhm,
advertised, awful lot. It came up on a Google search I was doing for something else the other day. I have no idea why I hadn't heard of it until I watched your meeting. So, I mean, they're pushing it out there, so it probably is gonna end up in some sort of bid. A competitive bid, I think.
Well, and we did hear
A lot of money.
that the town of Stratton, who potentially was also interested in it, has now backed off from it. So,
Gotta be a reason for that.
and it's right in their backyard. Yeah. All right. So we said we would bring it up at town meeting, so we're bringing it up here just so that we can tell everybody that this is something that was presented to us.
So just as an aside, and Travis can tell you, because Travis and I talked about this. For how many years were we getting sand from Sersosimo? I mean, for 30 years. And, they ran out there, there's no good sand that they have anymore. So they said they're not selling sand because it's not good. And, I'm going, I think, and Travis goes there too. We're trucking sand out of Northfield, Massachusetts up here. And it's only going to continue to get worse, because, and it's not just Act 250 in the state, but it's this part of the state. In other parts, I can tell you a hard story about a gravel pit in Brookline that was been there forever, and this district held them up for almost 3 years, 2.5 years. There was temporary change, and the person out of Rutland for Act 250 approved it with less than 30 days. They had their permit. They said this never should have gone this far. It's only going to get worse. Gravel's not going to get any cheaper, and sand, we need a lot of it. You know, we spend more on our highway budget for winter maintenance than a lot of towns spend for their entire budget, because, you know, we're asking people to come up here and ski. What do you need to ski? You need snow. It doesn't just snow on the mountain. I think it's definitely worth an investment. Newfane, you know, the gravel pit was coming up in Newfane. I talked to the select board about trying to get into that with Newfane, just like Dummerston and Putney did. They also worked with a private contractor so that there's somebody to manage the pit and run it. And then, you know, I think it's something that we really should consider. And although it's not a binding vote, I really think we should consider that, because who knows what it's going to be like in another 10 years. We're getting a lot more ice storms, a lot more needing sand. We're going to have more Irenes. We're going to need gravel. One of the things that saved our backside in Irene was we had access to a whole bunch of stone Bobby had stockpiled, plus a whole bunch up at the Hermitage Club that had been blasted. And, you know, we took their entire pile. So, you know, if we have our own materials, it's going to be a lot better for us too. And, you know, there may be a reason Stratton backed out. There may be a reason. $1 million is not something a lot of people have in their back pocket. I could see a bidding war on a $20,000 lot because people just think it's low, but I would really encourage the board to move forward on that. I'm going to shut up.
Is there potential to get a small group of towns together to go into this? I mean, it would
Potentially,
reduce
yeah.
the upfront costs.
So the Dummerston Putney one, where was that?
That's over on Route 5. It's the
In-
old Rainy Farm.
So it's in between the two towns?
It's in Dummerston.
Okay.
But Dummerston and Putney, even when I was in high school, they always worked together really well. They used to truck sand for each other. And I don't understand the relationship, but I think it's definitely, you know, we talked about maybe doing something with Newfane, and we approached Newfane selectman, and he used that to say, well, if we don't buy it, Dover's going to buy it. But it wasn't really, we're just asking. And again, there's not a lot of great gravel around anymore. Where are you getting gravel from still?
Well, I started buying it from Zaluzny, so, yeah, there's.
He doesn't get
Wherever I
anything.
can, Jamaica, you know, Vernon. It's, the resources is a concern, it is. And like I said, I haven't set foot in that pit. I've been told that there was stone, sand, and gravel, so, I guess you just have to see what there is for a resource there and how much.
Andy,
Would the idea be that you, have a bond vote for this, or were you thinking of raising it in the general fund, or if it was, or have you even got that?
We haven't even got that far. I mean, this was the last meeting we just had and it came before us, and we don't have a whole lot of really hardcore details. Supposedly there's some paperwork at one of the attorneys in Brattleboro that has something to do with the Act 250 process and why did that stall? And so that's kind of a big important piece of it, and they're trying to locate that paperwork and get it released so that they can market this property properly. So, or we just don't know enough, but we only have a chance. We only have everybody's ear once a year. So.
track.
I'm not opposed to I'm not 100% opposed to the idea. If people think we should look into it, I'm fine with that. A concern of mine is the people that I am buying these resources from. Why haven't they gone after it? Okay, they're in that business.
Right.
They have the money to be put forth to go after these permits and what seeking for these opportunities. Why haven't they? So that's enough, that's what makes me, that's a concern of mine.
I have a friend of mine who's an excavator in Millbrook, New York. He owns 150 acres of property. And on his property, he has great stone and gravel. And they told him one day, all of a sudden, there was a ordinance or something that he could only use it on his property, he couldn't sell it. So those kind of things happen when you go for permits.
So have we beat up gravel pit pretty bad?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay,
Repounded.
you want to go to?
And so Eric's gonna talk about the Valley Trail A-.
And again, this will be something though, at the meeting, we're gonna have to get approval because not a voter for Eric to speak and
Right.
which usually has never been an issue, but
So I think the point of the conversation at town meeting is to warn the public, get any general feedback from the public on whether or not to move forward with the Valley Trail A- project along Route 100. Many years before my time in Dover, additional plans for the Valley Trail were made to extend the trail south of Door Fifth Road by crossing the road, what is the Kirsten's property, over the river and across the front lawn of One Bogle Road. At the time, we received a grant for the project from Vermont Department of Transportation for it was basically $295,000. We'd be matching the additional $30,000 that we required to finish the project for a total number of $325,000. In the years since that, the last quote we got for 325 was in 2016. We asked for updated numbers because realistically at this point we'd be looking at closer to 2024 for implementation. And if we were to move forward with the project in 2024, we're looking at a price tag of approximately $866,000. So to go the additional 566 feet across the river, the Kirsten's Yard, the river, and One Bogle Road, you're looking at a linear foot price of about $1,530 a foot to get that distance that they're looking for. In the time since this project was proposed, the uses of the properties at the end of where this trail will terminate have changed. And we also need to take into consideration that while we would be crossing the road on the Kirsten's property over the river and across One Bogle Road to access the one retail store that would still be at the end of this trail, we would need to cross the road again. If we do not move forward with the project, basically we would need to reimburse the state for their fees and what they've done to process to this point, which would be about $10,000. But if we do move forward with the project, we'd be looking at, a price tag of at least $866,000. And I don't know that that takes into account the money we've already spent. It doesn't actually take into account the money we've already spent, but the old engineering that is no longer any good, or the municipal project manager that we've been paying to keep this project alive in hopes that we would complete it at some point. There's some very strong feelings on both sides of the issue. But we're at a point now where with Vermont Department of Transportation, we would need to either re-up or terminate our agreement with them on the project. If we decide to re-up and then cancel the project after, we're going to owe them more money in processing and reimbursements because they will have spent more time re-upping our contract for that. So we just need to make a decision pretty soon whether or not we're going to continue with the project.
can you add, how is that decision going to be made? Does the select board make that? Do we have to vote? Because we can't vote on that and be binding.
Right, so I think the purpose was to address this at town meeting to inform people that it would be coming to a vote by the select board shortly after town meeting. I think we were looking for those opinions and just to let people know that that decision would be coming, and if they were interested in being a part of the discussion further, that they should attend, keep an eye out on that for an agenda at a meeting, because I do believe the select board would be voting on whether.
Can you explain that at the end of his presentation so people would know?
I can add it to what I say if you'd like. I just.
Yeah, we're gauging feedback. We this is a lot more money than we had anticipated it being, and it's been a nightmare of a project because of the easements that have gone on for years and years trying to negotiate easements, then properties sold, new easements, and we don't even have those, do we, right, Eric?
So we're stuck right now in a bit of a chicken and an egg, because we don't want to move forward and get new engineering until we have the easement signed, but we can't on the state side get the easement signed until we have new engineering. So, neither one of us really wants to budge on that, because nobody wants to spend the money at the time without an assurance on either side. The other piece is that if/when the state decides to put out more grants for projects of this kind, there is a possibility that we could be approved for the additional funding. The only caveat there was that our grant we received for the project the first time was based on a 90% grant with a 10% match. Now they're looking at an 80% grant with a 20% match, so we'd still be on the hook for quite a bit of money if we could get the grant to supplement the grant we already had.
So you would just be asking for opinions and thoughts to be directed at the select board?
But just a question, I'm guessing the state, will it take that under $95,000 grant and turn it north, no sort of.
It's only for that piece of that particular, yeah.
That being said, there's no reason we couldn't apply for another grant for a project on the other side. We just can't reallocate those funds from that area to them.
Are there any other questions or comments, or is there anything, what would people need for more information? Go ahead, Marco, and then I'll get to you, Dad.
At the new current day estimates, what worst case scenario, what's the town and the whole board? Dollar number.
I don't have the exact math in front of me, so it would be the original 30,000. So then you figure another. Looking at, $550,000 over the original quote, so 20% of that.
Well,
In addition to
that's assuming we get another grant.
If
Worst case
we get
scenario would be we don't get
But,
another grant.
And that could accelerate, it could maybe still be 4 or 5 more years before we did it, so the price would continue to increase. Right? Because when's the next round of grants gonna come out, and would we get a grant? And
so they're hoping to launch grants this spring. You guys will be receiving a document from an interested citizen that's 17 pages long. With thoughts and data on the topic, so that will be shared with select board prior
To the town meeting or?
the select board meeting when we have this.
Andy, hang on, Tabby, and then. Tabby, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. I was just thinking that if the option is to take the hit for the $10,000 for the fee versus potentially not getting a grant and being on the hook for another 500,000 more than originally planned. If the town had to cover, we did not get the grant for getting any of that funding. Is there anything that would push us that we had to finish that last A- section, or can we just say we just need to stop and then focus our energy on other things, other grants for other additional structures? And what would that last mile actually get us? So.
Is there an answer to that, or is that something?
Thinking.
two cross, that's walks on Route 100.
Where it gets us a bridge across the river and it gets us a path to the wrong side of Route 100 from the only retail business that is done.
But there could be retail businesses in the future.
There could be the current intent, sorry, I don't need to keep rambling on here, the current intent to, the Tollgate Plaza is to turn it into residential. The old appliance building has been purchased to be used as residential / workshop for an electrician. So it's not as if, we're going to see the commercial aspect, the retail aspect that was once in that area.
Andrew, you need the mixer.
Yeah, so, Eric and I got an email from John Hannon today.
who was at your meeting when we were discussing this previously, lived on Vogel Road. And, he, wrote a report on the A- trail section and the decision you have to make, and it's absolutely fantastic. He did a lot of research. There's a lot of information from the Agency of Transportation, a lot of information about the properties in Dover, south of the bridge, including, Twice Blessed, Chital's, Indian Kitchen, and all the residential properties that might benefit as well. It's quite more than I would have just guessed, without looking at a map. But a lot of his report focuses on safety of pedestrians and bikers. It's worth a read. He sent it to Eric and I saying, hey, this is a first draft. What do you think? Hopefully he comes up with something or is willing to share that with you prior to town meeting, because it's definitely worth a read. It's really eye-opening. All I would say, I don't, a lot depends on the money, on what the potential, in my mind, on what the potential is to get grants, reduce the 800,000. A lot depends on Eric's budget, what's in the budget, how much do we have in the bank, and what's allocated and so forth. And I don't have any opinion on that. But as far as being a positive for the town, I think two of the best things that we've done economic development wise in this town are the park and the paved valley trail along the 100. People love that. And it's fantastic for people to drive into town and see families and joggers and people outside enjoying these spaces. I think, as far as economic development goes and advertising what we're all about, going to people who want to spend money here, a trail like that is amazing. And infrastructure doesn't go away. We're dealing with the fact we have to maintain things like that moving forward. But I wouldn't just write it off out of hand because of the numbers, unless you can get some really hard numbers. I think it would be fantastic to see that.
Thank you. But
Does the project include any sort of safety for people crossing the street over there? And that's, people are just coming into town. Some are just starting to slow down. It seems like
I'm sure we'll put some
dangerous.
signage, but of course, that's V-Trans too, it's Route 100. We can't,
that.
yeah,
We can't install lights or anything.
yeah.
is there any other? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, I'll get to Dan and go. Oh, you were waiting for Dan. Go ahead, Dan.
At the town meeting, when this came up, there was a gentleman there who lived by Toll House, I believe. And he said it was very dangerous there, there's potential for problems. And Randy was at the meeting and I asked him if he ever had any complaints there, and he said none.
Eric, go ahead, sir.
But my office overlooks this area. There are absolutely, it's a dangerous intersection for vehicles, for bikers, for walkers. It's dangerous right there. So Randy may not have had complaints for it, but I can attest to the fact, we've seen either accidents or near accidents happen in that area. Basically weekly since I started at Dover. So I absolutely understand that piece of it. The only other thing that, and the big reminder for everyone, is that this is not money that comes out of the general fund or your property taxes or anything like that. This is all 1% money. So I think just a big reminder that this doesn't affect how much you're paying.
Anybody else? Well, then,
We need to go into the Board of Liquor Control.
Yeah.
okay, well, I was gonna say that this would be over for the town
Right.
meeting, we would adjourn. And hopefully it'll be right around noon time, so we can all have lunch.
Mhm.
And I'm going to leave because I'm gonna give the select board back their meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, everybody, for coming from Freetown meeting. Stick around for liquor if you want. Thank you.
So I entertain a motion to go into the Board of Liquor Control. So moved. Do I have a second? Second by Dan. We have a special,
Jeanette
Thank you,
can't
board.
take minutes because people walking in front of us.
Travis, I'll wrap.
Hey, you want, Travis?
okay,
We don't have to worry about
Jeanette? I moved, Dan seconded.
Third.
so. We have special event permits for Ski Vermont event at Mount Snow on March 4th. Cold Spring Spirits LLC and Vermont Hard Cider Company LLC.
Do we have any objections from the police department?
Jeanette,
Both Randy and Rich was waiting and.
So I make a motion that we approve the special event permits for the Ski Vermont event at Mount Snow on March 4th for Cold Spring Spirits LLC and Vermont Hard Cider Company LLC.
second.
Scott seconded.
Scott, second. All in favor?
Aye.
All entertain a motion, we come out of the Board of Liquor Control.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'd like to adjourn this meeting at 7:15 PM.
Aye.
Oh, my gosh.